Every day, across forums, social media platforms, and Linux community channels, the same question appears dozens of times. I'm thinking about switching from Windows to Linux Mint. What should I know? These are not enthusiasts looking for technical challenges. These are ordinary users, people who have used Windows their entire computing lives. Teachers, small business owners, students, retirees, and they are reconsidering everything. The numbers are difficult to verify, precisely because Linux distributions do not track users the way proprietary operating systems do. But the visible indicators point in one direction. The Linux Mint download page reports millions of downloads monthly. Community forums show exponential growth in new user questions. YouTube tutorials about switching from Windows to Mint accumulate millions of views. Something is shifting in the personal computing landscape. Not suddenly, not dramatically, but persistently and measurably. Users who never questioned their operating system are suddenly questioning it. And when they search for alternatives, when they ask for recommendations, when they take the leap away from the familiar, one name appears more consistently than any other: Linux Mint. The question is why? What is driving this migration? Is it frustration with Windows? Is it concern about privacy? Is it economic? Is it philosophical? And more importantly, is this a temporary spike driven by recent controversies? Or is it the beginning of a fundamental realignment in how people think about the software that mediates their digital lives? If tens of thousands of users are willing to abandon an operating system they have used for decades, something profound is changing. And understanding that change reveals much about what users truly want from their computers. The decision to switch operating systems is never made lightly. For most people, their OS is invisible infrastructure. It is not something they think about or evaluate. It is simply there, the environment in which they work. Switching requires overcoming enormous inertia, learning new interfaces, reestablishing workflows, potentially replacing familiar software. Users only undertake this disruptive change when their current system creates sufficient frustration that the cost of staying exceeds the cost of leaving. And for a growing number of Windows users, that threshold has been crossed. Forced updates represent the most commonly cited frustration. Windows 11 Home Edition provides minimal control over when updates install and when the system restarts. Users report losing work to unexpected restarts. Creative professionals describe rendering jobs interrupted after hours of processing. Remote workers experience disconnections during critical video calls. The active hours feature is meant to prevent this, but its 12-hour limitation does not accommodate irregular schedules or different usage patterns on different days. Users who work late nights or have unpredictable hours cannot adequately protect themselves from forced restarts. Every update becomes a potential ambush. Updates also frequently reset user preferences. Privacy settings that were carefully configured get re-enabled after feature updates. Default applications revert to Microsoft's choices. Interface customizations disappear. Users describe spending hours optimizing their system to their workflow, only to have quarterly feature updates undo that personalization. This creates exhausting vigilance where every update requires verification that nothing changed without consent. Users who value control and predictability, this feels like a betrayal of the implicit contract that your computer should serve you. Hardware requirements for Windows 11 alienated users with functional but officially unsupported systems. The mandate for TPM 2.0 and specific CPU generations left millions of perfectly capable computers unable to upgrade officially. While workarounds exist, they are unsupported and may break in future updates. Users with 5 or 6-year-old systems that run Windows 10 flawlessly were told their hardware is obsolete. For environmentally conscious users or those on limited budgets, being forced to replace functional hardware feels wasteful and exploitative. Privacy and telemetry concerns drive another segment of migration. Windows 11 collects extensive diagnostic data even at the most restrictive settings. Users cannot verify what is actually transmitted. They must trust Microsoft's privacy statements. For privacy-conscious individuals, this constant communication with corporate servers, the knowledge that their activities are logged and analyzed, even in aggregate, creates profound discomfort. The integration of AI features like Copilot intensifies these concerns, as users wonder what data these systems access and how it is used. Cloud integration and Microsoft account requirements frustrate users who prefer local-only computing. The operating system increasingly assumes you want OneDrive folder backup, setting sync, and integration with Microsoft's ecosystem. Users who deliberately chose local accounts to avoid cloud dependency find those options progressively hidden or removed. The system nags about switching to Microsoft accounts, enabling OneDrive, and connecting to services users explicitly declined. This persistent pressure to accept an integrated ecosystem feels manipulative to users who want their computer to be a standalone tool. Advertising within the operating system crosses a line for many users. The Start menu shows suggested apps. The lock screen displays promotional content. Settings pages include prompts to try Microsoft services. For users who purchased Windows licenses, seeing advertisements in their operating system feels inappropriate. They paid for the product. They should not be treated as an advertising audience. Collectively, these frustrations create a feeling that Windows no longer works for the user, but rather that the user exists within constraints defined by Microsoft's business priorities. And when that feeling becomes unbearable, users begin researching alternatives. And in that research, Linux Mint appears consistently as the recommended starting point for refugees from Windows. Linux Mint's appeal to Windows users is not accidental. It is the result of deliberate design philosophy and community focus. The Mint team explicitly targets users transitioning from Windows, prioritizing familiarity, ease of use, and out-of-box functionality. The default desktop environment, Cinnamon, is designed to feel immediately comfortable to Windows users. The taskbar sits at the bottom. The menu button is in the lower left corner. Applications are organized in familiar categories. Window controls are where Windows users expect them. This intentional similarity reduces the initial learning curve dramatically. The installation process is straightforward and well documented. The Mint website provides clear instructions for creating bootable USB drives. The installer includes a live environment, allowing users to test Mint before installing, ensuring hardware compatibility and interface familiarity before committing. The installation wizard is graphical, simple, and explains each step in plain language. Partition management includes automatic options for users who want simplicity and manual options for advanced users. Within 30 minutes, most users can have a functional Linux Mint system running. Hardware support is exceptional. Mint includes extensive driver support out of the box. Wireless networking, Bluetooth, audio, graphics, touchpads. Most common hardware works immediately without manual driver installation. The driver manager detects proprietary drivers needed for specific hardware, like NVIDIA graphics cards, and offers simple one-click installation. This contrasts sharply with the historical Linux experience, where hardware compatibility required extensive manual configuration. Software availability addresses most common use cases. Mint includes LibreOffice for documents, spreadsheets, and presentations, Firefox for web browsing, Thunderbird for email, a full multimedia stack for playing videos and music, image viewers, text editors, archive managers, PDF readers. Everything typical users need is pre-installed and configured. The software manager provides a graphical app store with thousands of free applications covering virtually every category. Installing software is as simple as searching, clicking install, and entering your password. The system is lightweight and fast. Mint runs smoothly on hardware that struggles with Windows 11. Users with older systems report dramatic performance improvements, with computers that were sluggish under Windows becoming responsive and pleasant to use. This is not magic. It is the result of leaner system architecture, fewer background services, and the absence of telemetry, forced updates, and cloud sync operations consuming resources. Stability is a core value. Mint is based on Ubuntu long-term support releases, which prioritize stability over cutting-edge features. Updates are conservative. The system focuses on reliability and predictability rather than constant change. For users, exhausted by Windows' perpetual churn of interface redesigns and feature experiments, Mint's stability is profoundly appealing. Privacy is built in, not added on. Mint includes no telemetry by default. It does not phone home. It does not require accounts. It does not assume internet connectivity. Your computing remains private and local unless you explicitly choose to use cloud services. For users who value privacy, this default respect for anonymity is liberating. The community support is extensive and welcoming. The Linux Mint forums are active, moderated, and known for being friendly to beginners. Users report that asking for help yields detailed, patient responses. YouTube is filled with Mint tutorials. The documentation is comprehensive. This support network dramatically lowers the barrier to entry for non-technical users. Beyond the specific features and interface of Linux Mint, many users are attracted to the broader philosophy of open source software. Understanding this philosophy is essential to understanding the migration, because for many users, switching to Mint is not just about finding a better operating system. It is about aligning their computing with their values. Open source means the source code, the actual programming instructions that make the software work, is publicly available for anyone to inspect, modify, and distribute. Linux Mint's code is hosted on public repositories. Any programmer can read it, verify it does what it claims, identify bugs or security vulnerabilities, and propose improvements. This transparency is fundamentally different from proprietary software, where the code is secret, controlled by a corporation, and users must trust that the software behaves ethically without ability to verify. This transparency provides security benefits. Security through obscurity, hiding how software works and hoping attackers do not find vulnerabilities, has been repeatedly proven ineffective. Open source operates on the principle that many eyes make bugs shallow. When thousands of developers can examine code, vulnerabilities are found and fixed faster. While no software is perfectly secure, open source enables community-driven security auditing that proprietary software cannot match. Customization is another major advantage. Because the source code is available, advanced users can modify anything. If you dislike how a feature works, you can change it. If you need specialized functionality, you can add it. This level of control is impossible with proprietary software, where modification violates the license agreement and is technically impractical without source code. Community development means the software is built by volunteers and nonprofit organizations rather than profit-driven corporations. Linux Mint is maintained by a small team funded through donations and sponsorships. They have no shareholders demanding quarterly growth. They have no advertising revenue to protect. Their incentive structure prioritizes user satisfaction rather than monetization. This alignment of incentives with user interests creates trust. Freedom is central. Open source licenses, particularly the GNU, General Public License that governs Linux, guarantee users the freedom to run the software for any purpose, study how it works, modify it, and share it. These freedoms cannot be revoked. If Linux Mint's developers made decisions the community opposed, the code could be forked, copied, and continued by new maintainers. This prevents lock-in and ensures user sovereignty. However, open source is not without limitations. Development is often slower than well-funded proprietary projects. Features can be rough around edges. Support is community-based rather than corporate, which means no service-level agreements or guaranteed response times. For enterprise use, these limitations matter. For individual users willing to accept responsibility for their systems, the trade-off is worthwhile. Despite Mint's accessibility and the appeal of open source, switching from Windows to Linux involves real challenges that must be honestly acknowledged. Portraying Mint as a perfect solution for everyone would be dishonest and set unrealistic expectations that lead to disappointment. Software compatibility remains the primary obstacle. Professional applications like Adobe Creative Suite do not run natively on Linux. Workarounds exist, running Windows in a virtual machine using compatibility layers like Wine, but none provide the seamless native experience professionals require. For photographers, videographers, and designers whose livelihood depends on Adobe tools, switching to Linux means either finding alternative software, which may lack feature parity, or maintaining Windows for professional work while using Linux for everything else. Microsoft Office, while it has a web version, does not have a native Linux application. LibreOffice is capable and handles most documents well, but complex formatting, advanced macros, and deep integration with Microsoft's ecosystem can be problematic. For users in corporate environments where document compatibility is critical, this can be a deal breaker. Gaming compatibility has improved dramatically but is not universal. Steam's Proton compatibility layer allows thousands of Windows games to run on Linux with native or near-native performance. But games with kernel-level anti-cheat systems like Valorant, certain Call of Duty titles, and Destiny 2 do not work because their anti-cheat requires Windows kernel access that Linux cannot and should not provide. Gamers whose primary titles include these games cannot fully switch to Linux. Hardware compatibility, while generally excellent, has exceptions. Brand new hardware, particularly laptops with cutting-edge features, may lack Linux support at launch. Fingerprint readers, hybrid graphic systems, and proprietary hardware features sometimes require community-developed drivers that may not be available immediately. Gaming peripherals with custom RGB lighting and configuration software often lack Linux support. The learning curve, while minimized by Mint's design, is real. Keyboard shortcuts differ. Some software works differently. Troubleshooting sometimes requires the terminal, which intimidates users unfamiliar with command line interfaces. While modern Linux rarely requires terminal use for routine tasks, it remains the most efficient path for certain operations and for resolving issues. Workflow adjustments are necessary. Muscle memory for Windows-specific behaviors must be retrained. Some features work differently or require different approaches. Applications you relied on may have different names or be replaced by different tools. This adaptation period can be frustrating and requires patience. File format considerations matter. While Linux handles Microsoft Office formats, subtle compatibility issues can occur with complex documents. Users sharing files with Windows users need to be mindful of these potential incompatibilities. The absence of certain niche software can be problematic. Specialized professional tools, legacy software, and certain commercial applications simply do not exist for Linux. Users depending on these must maintain Windows access. Despite these limitations, many users find that Mint meets their needs perfectly. For web browsing, email, document creation, media consumption, and general productivity, Mint is excellent. The software ecosystem covers most common use cases. Performance is often superior to Windows. Privacy is dramatically better, and for users whose work or interests do not depend on Windows exclusive software, the switch is entirely practical. The migration to Linux Mint, whether it is thousands or tens of thousands or hundreds of thousands of users, represents something more significant than mere dissatisfaction with Windows. It reflects a growing segment of users who are questioning the fundamental direction of personal computing and actively seeking alternatives that align with different values. This movement is part of a broader backlash against the platform ecosystem model that has come to dominate technology. For 2 decades, the industry has moved toward walled gardens where hardware, software, and services are tightly integrated and centrally controlled. Apple pioneered this with iOS. Google followed with Android and Chrome OS. Microsoft is attempting to apply it to Windows. These ecosystems offer undeniable benefits: seamless integration, automatic updates, cross-device continuity, but they demand surrender of user autonomy in exchange for convenience. The users migrating to Mint are explicitly rejecting this trade-off. They are saying that convenience is not worth the cost of control, that transparency matters more than polish, that ownership means something, that a computer should be a tool that serves the user's vision rather than a platform that serves the vendor's ecosystem. This is not a rejection of technology, but a rejection of how technology is being shaped by commercial imperatives. Privacy consciousness is driving part of this movement. Revelations about data collection, surveillance capitalism, and the extent to which digital activities are tracked and monetized have radicalized users who previously accepted these practices as normal. Moving to Linux Mint is a concrete action toward digital privacy. It removes the telemetry, the account requirements, the cloud integration, the AI that requires your data. It returns computing to a local, private, user-controlled model. Economic factors play a role. Linux Mint is free. Not just free to download, but free of ongoing costs. No subscription fees, no forced hardware upgrades, no license compliance. For users on tight budgets, for education institutions, for developing regions, this economic accessibility is transformative. Environmental considerations motivate others. Mint runs well on old hardware, extending the useful life of computers that Windows would obsolete. In an era of growing awareness about electronic waste and the environmental impact of constant hardware replacement cycles, choosing software that respects existing hardware is an ethical stance. Technical users appreciate the transparency and control. Being able to examine exactly what their system is doing, to modify any aspect, to understand the full stack from kernel to desktop, is intellectually satisfying and practically useful. For developers, system administrators, and technically curious users, Linux provides learning opportunities impossible in proprietary systems. The philosophical appeal of open source resonates with users who believe software should be collaborative, transparent, and community-driven rather than proprietary and profit-focused. Supporting open source feels like supporting a better model of technology development. Linux Mint is not new. It first appeared in 2006, based on Ubuntu, itself based on Debian, tracing lineage back to the earliest days of free software. The technology is mature. The philosophy is decades old. Yet today, in 2025, it is experiencing renewed attention and growing adoption. The question is, why now? And the answer is not that Mint suddenly became better. The answer is that the alternatives became worse. Or perhaps more accurately, the alternatives changed in ways that violated assumptions users had held about what an operating system should be and do. Windows became more controlling, more cloud-dependent, more privacy-invasive, more advertising-laden. And users who had accepted these changes incrementally suddenly looked at the totality and said, no. The migration to Linux Mint is not primarily about Linux. It is about what users are fleeing and what they are seeking. They are fleeing forced updates and surveillance. They are fleeing planned obsolescence and vendor lock-in. They are fleeing advertising and products they purchased. They are seeking privacy and control. They are seeking software that respects them. They are seeking an operating system that serves their needs rather than demanding they serve its ecosystem. And Linux Mint, with its Windows-like interface, its careful attention to new user experience, and its bedrock commitment to user freedom, provides that alternative. Whether this migration represents a meaningful market shift or remains a relative trickle depends on perspective. Even if 1 million users switch to Mint this year, that is less than 1% of Windows user base. Microsoft is not threatened. But percentages obscure impact. Every user who switches is a person who decided their digital autonomy mattered more than convenience. Every tutorial video teaching people how to install Mint is normalizing the idea that you can choose your operating system. Every success story, every teacher running their classroom on Mint, every small business replacing Windows demonstrates that alternatives exist and work. The real story is not whether Linux Mint will overtake Windows. It will not. The real story is that an increasing number of people are discovering they have a choice, that they do not have to accept forced updates, constant telemetry, and progressive loss of control, that they can run an operating system that is transparent, customizable, and designed to serve them rather than monetize them. And once people discover they have a choice, once they realize the computer on their desk can be genuinely theirs, configured to their preferences, respectful of their privacy, and answerable only to them, it becomes very difficult to accept anything less. The migration to Linux Mint is not about Linux, it is about freedom. And the fact that tens of thousands of people are choosing that freedom despite the friction and the learning curve and the incompatibilities suggests something profound. That what people want from their computers at the deepest level is not features or integration or AI assistance. What they want is sovereignty, and they are willing to work for it.